So we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Martin Cooper here. Martin, you're somebody that has really disrupted the world. You had an idea, a dream, a vision for something that could connect people, billions of people throughout the world, and you actualized it. You made it happen. You made it real. It's something that you work really hard on, and you believed in yourself to do. And by creating the handheld cell phone, it changed people's lives. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story and to what you think the future is.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Ben, and I'm happy to talk about anything you want to talk about.
Awesome. So, where did your passion for cellular and communications and business, like, where did that begin? Was it something, Martin, you always had as a kid and you always thought, hey, I'm going to do something like this? Where did that start?
Well, Ben, from my earliest memory, I have had a passion for knowing how things work. I really, even when I was 5 or 6 years old, I saw some kids playing with a magnifying glass, and they were using the sun to burn paper. I thought that was amazing. And so I immediately got a Coke bottle and broke the bottom off and tried to use that as a lens and failed. And it was maybe my first failure, but there have been many, many since then. I just love to take things apart. I still do because I'm just fascinated by technology. And I always knew I was going to be an engineer. I did not become an electrical engineer until I went to college. In college, the first year, everybody does the same thing. And I discovered that I had no idea what chemistry was. And if I wanted to go on and be a physicist, which is what I signed up for, I would have had to take another couple of years of chemistry. So I ended up moving to electrical engineering where I didn't have to take any more chemistry, which just gives you an idea of how planned my life was. I I have had what I would consider to be an accidental life, and all the accidents have been very positive, and I'm very grateful for what the world has dealt to me.
Hmm. So how did like the opportunity for you to join Motorola happen? Was that just out of college, you needed a job? How did you get involved there?
No, actually, I went to a wonderful university, Illinois Tech, and I'm, as a matter of fact, on their board of trustees now. And the only way that I could afford to do that was to let the government pay for it. And so I became a naval officer and spent 3.5 years in the Navy.
Oh,
When I got out of the Navy, I would have loved to go to Bell Labs, but they wouldn't have me. And I tried to go to Armor Research Foundation. They wouldn't have me. So I ended up going to work for a company that doesn't exist anymore, Teletype Corp. You know what a teletype machine is, Ben?
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
I didn't think you would. I'm not going to waste your time talking about it much, but teletype machines were the way people communicated 70 years ago. It was a mechanical device where you would type at one end or run a tape at one end, and it would type out pieces of paper at the other end. Purely mechanical, and they decided that their future was going to be electronics. So they started an electronics group, which I was part of, and it turns out it was hopeless. These guys just were basically mechanical. The only electrical part of this machine was a motor that drove the thing. So it became obvious to me very quickly that this was not going to be the future of society. And Motorola approached me, and that was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me because I ended up being at Motorola for 30 years, and I had just a remarkable career. They taught me a great deal, and I still live by many of the lessons that I learned at Motorola. Just without dwelling on it, the motto of the founder of Motorola was "Do not fear failure, reach out."
oh,
And I took that very seriously, and I had my share of failures. but because they tolerated those failures, I managed to do some really interesting stuff, took a lot of chances, and some of those actually panned out, as you well know.
Yeah. So at what point, like, was there like a specific experience, Martin, that you thought, hey, I'm going to try to make a handheld cell phone real? I mean, there were some kind of sci-fi shows and things that, that kind of alluded to something like this being possible as handheld cell phone. But what, like, was there something like an experience that you decided, hey, I'm going to really try to make this a real thing?
Well, absolutely. This was really, I hate to use that expression with what's going on in the world today, but it was a form of commercial warfare. The Bell system was a monopoly. Uh, I still to this day, I don't know if the word hate is right, but I think monopolies are terrible.
Mhm.
I have great admiration for competitive systems where people try to use technology and strategy to provide services that are superior to other people's services. But the Bell system actually invented the idea of cellular. They
Hmm.
did that way back in the 1940s, and one of the top researchers at Bell Laboratories, a fellow named Ray Young, and a colleague of his, wrote a paper describing what cell phone services would look like. And of course, their idea of what a cell phone was a car telephone, and they decided that their idea was interesting but not very profound. And they put this memo in the file, and 20 years later, the AT&T, which was the Bell system at that time, very different AT&T that exists today, announced that they were going to come up with this new thing called a cellular telephone.
Hmm.
And sure enough, 20 years later, it was still a car telephone. I was, as we discussed at Motorola, we had already been building precursors of the cell phone, car telephones for years. And we were already making handheld devices and very practical. And Bell System announced that they were going to put all their resources to work providing this great service, but that it was not going to be a very big business. They
Huh.
didn't think many people were interested in cell phones, and therefore there was not room for more than one person. Does that surprise you?
Wow.
They wanted a monopoly in our telephones as well. And so we had this little company in Chicago took on the biggest company in the world, which the Bell System was at that time, and our position was very clear. We didn't like monopolies. Of course, we were dominant in the two-way radio business, but that was very competitive. Our competitors were people like General Electric and RCA was a huge company at that time. So we did not like monopolies, and we thought that the public ought to decide whether they're going to have car telephones or handheld phones. And we took this little company in Chicago, took on the biggest company in the world. And the battle went on for 13 years. Uh, in 1972, the end of 1972, we were becoming paranoid because this whole thing is going to be decided by bureaucrats in Washington, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. The government needs bureaucrats, but the Bell system, they decided the decision maker was the FCC. At that time, there were five FCC commissioners, there were half a dozen Bell System lobbyists assigned to each commissioner, and, and every senator was called on by an FCC or a Bell System lobbyist. Motorola had three people in Washington to cover the Congress, the FCC, and every other agency. So we were certainly not going to win the lobbyist battle. And in the end of 1972, it looked like the FCC was ready to make a decision, and it could have been the wrong decision.
Huh.
And the management was going to make a big presentation in Washington demonstrating how important two-way radios were, which is what we were building. When I started at Motorola, and I told my mother about this, and she was very disappointed. I was going to build two-way radios, so she would much have preferred that I was a doctor or a lawyer or a judge, but two-way radios were really boring. And that's when I decided that we were never going to win this battle by persuading people how important two-way radios were, even though the police departments, fire departments, all kinds of the industry depended very much on two-way radios. For the public, it was boring. So at that time, I approached the management. I said, I can build a car, a real a cellular telephone, a handheld personal telephone. And they said, go ahead, but you got to have your thing done by the time we do this demonstration. And it's scheduled for 3 months from now. I put a team together. The management was very supportive. We had resources all over the company, including the semiconductor division, the auto radio division, and we had the sharpest engineers in the company working on this team. And sure enough, in 3 months, they had a telephone. And we went first to New York, where I made the very first cellular phone call, and then went on to Washington, where we demonstrated this phone to the Congress, to the FCC, and in the normal course of events, at the speed of lightning, which happens in Washington all the time. But 10 years later, they ended up making a decision. And I have to tell you, Ben, up until the last minute, we never knew whether the decision would be in our favor. But in 1981, they pretty much decided that their business would be competitive, that they would first select people who were parts of the Bell system and parts of the commercial world, and that the industry as a whole would decide whether these were handheld phones or car telephones. And so, but the wonderful part of it is that we did prevail, because if we had not participated in designing those first systems, they would have been car telephone systems,
Huh.
and it would have been possible to use portable handheld radios. And if that had happened, you know it was inevitable we're going to have handheld phones, but it would have taken 10 or 20 years longer. And
Martin, did you think that, like, when you were building this, did you think that it would have as much of an impact on the world as the cell phone has had today? I mean, it's the primary form of communication. It's impacted everybody's lives. You know, the world doesn't even exist without it. It's a different world. Did you believe that that's really what would have happened? Do you think it would have this much of an impact that it has?
well, the story that we told Ben was that someday when a person was born, they'd be assigned a phone number, and if they didn't answer the phone, they had died. So we were pretty sure everybody was going to have a cell phone. And as you know, there are more cell phones in the world today than there are people. About 80% of the people in the world actually have cell phone subscriptions. And so the idea, though, that a cell phone, it's kind of ridiculous to call it a phone anymore, isn't it? The cell phone now has a camera. Most people don't even know what a camera is, other than the one that's built into their cell phone. The cell phone is actually an extension of a person. It's not only a telephone; it's a source of media. It's got a camera built in. It's got the ability to do what you and I are doing right now, talk to people in person. It's got a supercomputer built into it, so it could do computation and dictation, and it could recognize voices, and it could translate it. Well, going back to 1973 when we made that first phone call, there were no digital cameras. The internet did not exist. It was an idea in Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn's heads. The large-scale integrated circuit didn't exist, so there was no way you could run hundreds of, or today we have literally thousands of radio channels covered by every handheld cell phone. So no, we did not expect this to be as complex a device as it is today.
Why do you think that Motorola decided, like you mentioned, Martin, they were a small company, they were trying to compete, but they invested, I believe, was $100 million over 20 years in what you believed, and you said you had a couple of different failures before, you were trying to make something happen there. Why do you think they stuck with this vision, with this product that you had so long, and really got behind you with funding like that?
Well, you said the right word, Ben. Fortunately, I shared my vision with the company. The company was strongly dedicated to wireless communications, just being in the two-way radio business. But the company, and actually it went right up to the chairman of the company, Bob Galvin, and he personally supported this because if he hadn't, we never would have gotten off of first base.
Huh.
A competitive company with a board of directors would never have made a decision like that to actually risk the corporation on the basis of a crazy idea by a couple of engineers and business managers. So you know, I cannot say enough good things about Motorola and my relationship with at Motorola because going back to the beginning, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. In my later career, I was running businesses, and the businesses were not always successful because I wanted to do things in a futuristic way, and sometimes you can reach out too far in the future, and you don't meet the profit objectives for that year. Well, I can't tell you how many times we had a bonus plan, and the bonus plan was based on a number of criteria, but one of them is profitability. And they pass out the bonus checks, and my people, the people in my organization would get handsome bonuses. And when it came time for mine, they say, "Well, Barney, you really did a great job talking about futuristic products, but you didn't meet all your financial objectives, and I'm sorry we're passing you this time." But I never questioned I was at a playground. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. I was playing with technology. I was imagining what the future was going to be like. And that was really, it's always been my life. I guess the way I express it is that the reason that I know so much about the future is that I spend most of my time there. I just imagining things and pretending I was there, and imagining, however, with a technological basis. So this is not just science fiction. This is trying to figure out how people were going to live. and I ought to mention that, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much. One of the essences of what I learned at Motorola and was part of my philosophy of life, that technology has no significance if it doesn't make the lives of people better.
Huh.
There are so many people in the engineering community that fall in love with their technology, with the science, and forget about the whole purpose of this thing is to make people's lives better, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and by the way, that's happening today. I am very unhappy with the state of cellular systems today. The carriers are trying to convince everybody that 5G is their future. And when you look at what the details of 5G are, they don't do a thing for the people.
Huh.
They're, they're designed for commercial systems, factories, and I'm not suggesting that those things are not important, but
Hmm.
the United States, the most advanced culture in the world, has the highest cost of cellular service of any country. That's terrible. Their idea of focusing on what we call millimeter waves, which is an important part of what 5G is, when there are significant proportion of our population that can't afford cell
Hmm.
phones. And you started out our conversation by talking about how important cell phones are in people's lives, how they make people's lives better. Uh, I'm very disappointed in the attitude of the carriers.
Hmm.
Uh, sure, they have provided important services, but they should have a better balance between the future of 5G and things of that nature and just providing affordable service to
Hmm.
everybody.
So, I mean, in terms of like the evolution of the cell phone from a physical standpoint, there's been a bunch of different changes, and they went touchscreen. Now a lot of people, Martin, are talking about the headset and the metaverse and the Apple Vision Pro and this headset that you can see into. Do you think that that's where cell phones are going, and that could be the future mobile device? Like, what do you think is the next phase for physical, how the physical cell phone will look?
Well, you're a little late on that question, Ben, because I've, I've been promoting that for 5 or 6 years now. That the idea as an example of an app on a cell phone has gotten kind of ridiculous. There are, if you decide that you need a specific application, they say, oh, it's very simple. Just go and download it. Well, there are 4 million apps available. How do you select the right one? And then you download it into this a piece of metal and plastic that's flat, put it against your curved head, and hold your arm up in an uncomfortable position. So the whole system is suboptimal. And so I've been predicting for some time that the cell phone really is a functional machine. It's supposed to do things for you in an optimal way. And so my vision of the cell phone for the last, well, forever has been a device that had an artificial intelligence built into it, that it would examine your behavior and it would come up with apps that it will either find for you or create an app that will basically make your life better. And the cell phone would be distributed on your body. It wouldn't be just a single thing. The simplest thing was making a phone call, and that could be a device that for a woman, it could be an earring. It might be an earbud. Ultimately, it would be embedded under your skin so that you could use your body to charge it instead of charging it up every day. So I believe we're headed in that direction. And the most gratifying thing is just within the last few weeks, a company called Humana, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right,
Yeah.
has announced a device which is a badge that you wear on your chest. it's got an artificial intelligence built into it, and you can talk to it, and it is examining you and the environment continuously and creating it's an intelligence that makes your life better. So I want you to know I never got a nickel from Humane, but I'm very grateful for their executing on this. I'm not sure that their approach is exactly right, but
Mhm.
it is the first step, I think, in the next generation of what we call the cell phone.
Yeah, I mean that's been getting a lot of traction. The AI pin, because you're the way you communicate. It's like there's two major new technologies that are coming out with this ability to see with this headset, and then the ability to communicate with AI and for it to understand you. And like that intersection of them is really, I think, what likely what we'll see with the next devices, like you mentioned.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right there. There are a lot of people very correctly concerned about AI. This idea of they're being able to create an image of Ben Wood that talks like Ben Wood, looks like him, but is totally constructed. It's got to be a little scary, isn't it? Doesn't I don't know if it worries you, but we've gone through these technological leaps in the past. They've all been dangerous, and yet we've managed to survive. So I think artificial intelligence, properly used, is going to be extraordinary and beneficial to mankind. On the other hand, the dangers are genuine, and we're just going to have to. I guess let me tell you what I've decided about the future of artificial intelligence. We humans are not smart enough to regulate artificial intelligence. We're going to have to create an artificial intelligence that it regulates all of the other artificial intelligences. But one way we're going to figure it out.
Mhm. So, Martin, at this point in your life, what are you most excited about creating next? Are there some things that you want to do that you haven't done yet that you really want to be able to build, and what would those be?
Yeah, well, I do have several passions that I'm working on now. It's very difficult for an individual to do much nowadays, but I am on a advisory committee to the FCC. In fact, I'm the only one on this committee that's not an industrial person. But my number one passion is education. I don't think you can get a modern education without having a cell phone.
Right.
Most teachers don't agree with me. My my granddaughter is a teacher, and she's married to a very competent teacher, and he hates the cell phone because it's a distraction. Well, I don't blame him, but distractions in the classroom are not new. When I was a kid, we would throw spitballs at each other and the old conversations, and teachers have to figure that out. But the nature of education has got to change. The idea of a teacher standing up and lecturing like I'm doing to you now is kind of ludicrous if you think about the fact that this kid has access to all the information in the world. So providing information to a student is not the primary role of a teacher. The teachers have to teach their students how to use these new tools, teach them things like ethics and how to deal with other people. So there is an opportunity to educate our children in ways that we couldn't imagine in the past. And the reason I'm so passionate about this, Ben, is I think it's the only hope for the world.
Uh,
Uh, the two biggest problems in the world today are warfare and poverty. And nobody could argue with me about those things. No excuse for anybody to be hungry today. We produce more food, twice as much food as we need. We just haven't figured out how to distribute it right. I don't have to talk about warfare being just so stupid that my belief is that an educated populace ultimately will do the right thing and will eliminate poverty and warfare. So those are whatever little that I can do in that direction. I am doing. Would you believe that in an advanced society like the U.S., half of our children do not have access to the internet?
Oh,
Well,
really?
about 20% of them don't have service. Could you imagine that?
Huh.
You look at the advertising of these carriers. I don't want to sound like I'm still battling the bell system, but it feels like it. But if you're in a rural area, and a lot of times in suburban and sometimes in the middle of the city, there is no cellular service.
Hmm.
And and even when there is cellular service, a large percentage of the kids can't afford to have cell phones. There ought to be a cell phone system just for young students that curates the information so they don't have access to things they shouldn't have. But one way or another, the cell phone has got to be a part of education, and the educational system has to adapt to the new technologies, not the other way around.
Mm. Look, Martin, that's all the kind of questions that I had. I appreciate you coming on. I think you have an amazing story, and what you did was so impactful to everybody. And some of the things you're talking about in the future here, I mean, there needs to be some changes to education. There's a lot of these technologies that have to be used, and I think that your insights into AI and how it's going to affect cellular communication and the phone is really right on. And I'm excited to see what you'll do next and what's going to come over this space.
Well, it's nice of you to say that, Ben. I apologize for talking so much, but you do ask the right questions, and it was a great pleasure to be on your podcast. I wish you a lot of luck.